So, ladies and gentlemen, Accolonn here, and of course, welcome back to each and every one of you to the 7th episode of The Shill Show, the official episode 7 of The Shill Show. We had episode 6, but that's because the 1 week we basically couldn't stream because it went down. So this is the official 7th episode. I welcome all of you back, whether you're watching this over on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever the hell you get your podcast from. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I really hope that you will enjoy the show. We've got quite a full one for you today, but before we get into that, chat, how you guys doing? All of the live viewers right now, I hope you guys are doing very, very well. I want to ask you, for those of you that's obviously been watching the videos, what have you thought about the new videos on the channel? You know, the more highly edited, more like high effort videos. Have you been enjoying it? Do you miss the old days of just getting in front of the camera and making, making stuff? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. The videos take a lot of effort to do, but I'm falling in love with doing it that way. Getting better at editing, learning things along the way. So it's super fun. Hit the like button, of course, if you haven't already. It always does help out. And like I said, we have a rather full show today. There's a lot of things happening within Blizzard Entertainment, although not a lot of things happening in WoW right now, since we have Diablo 4 releasing and everyone in Blizzard is just playing Diablo 4 at the minute. So I'm assuming roundabout like end of next week, probably beginning of the week after that, we'll probably get back into like massive WoW news and stuff like that, just so that Blizzard doesn't step on their own toes. So I think it's fine that there's a little bit of a lull right now. You know, World of Warcraft's been popping off, and it's good to see people really enjoying Diablo 4. So I guess we'll start with the Diablo 4 topic before we get into the more generalized Diablo topic, and then end up with WoW lore, which is what I personally prefer to talk about, but I do want to cover a couple of things. So Diablo 4, it's been absolute madness. Everyone's been losing their minds. Some people have lost complete track of reality. You know, you get people claiming things on where else, Twitter, that, Diablo 4's launch proves that AAA games can have brilliant launches that just go absolutely smoothly, because apparently everyone seems to forget that the only people for whom Diablo 4 actually did launch are people that Blizzard love, right? And people that Blizzard sponsored, so they got the game for free, or people that were willing to dish out $100 for a video game. I, of course, refused to dish out $100 for a video game, and Blizzard hates me, so they'll never sponsor me. So I will only be playing with the plebs. I'm going to be, like, literally loading in, when is it? Tuesday, I think it is? Yeah, Tuesday. That I will be loading into Diablo 4, and we'll see then, right? I'm not saying that it will be a bad launch, but you can imagine right now, maybe Diablo 4 has 500 to a million players, right? 500,000 to a million players. When it goes live, that's when millions upon millions of players are going to hit those servers all at the same time. And that's when we're going to see like the actual launch. Now, I'm not happy with how this works, right? I do think that this is just very scumbag, $100 for a game. And I want to explain why I think it's scumbag, because I think a lot of people don't get me wrong, I'm very excited for D4 and I can't wait to play it. I did pre-order like most other people, even though I hate pre-orders. I did pre-order this because I knew I was going to play it no matter what. I've always been a fan of Diablo 4, and there is some really good things that I can say about Diablo 4, but I will say the idea that, back in the day, if you guys remember a decade ago, we were told that video games have become incredibly expensive to make, and that the only way for video game companies to keep the price at $60 is for cash shops to exist, right? So they need cash shops, they need things like the game passes and shit like this. And, none of us really accepted that argument, but we were like, okay, fine, and they even said, if you guys would allow us to charge $70 for a video game, that would not be a problem. Then we don't have to have the cash shops. We don't have to have all of these battle passes because $70 will cover all of our costs. Well, lo and behold, we're on $70 now for a video game, right? All games that launch now are $70. The cash shops are still there. The battle passes are still there. It's even gotten more scumbag now because you don't just get the game for $70. No, you get the game for $70, but then you can go for like a deluxe edition that is $80 or $90, and then you can go for the ultimate edition, which is like an extra $10 or $20 on top of that. And what I don't like about this is the ultimate people already get a bunch of in-game goodies, right? And that's perfectly fine. If you're gonna pay more money, you need to get something extra. That's not a problem. But then you give them, what was it? Almost, like, when did the game go live? It was on Thursday. So you give them 4 days early access to the game. They can start the game 4 days earlier than anyone else. So effectively, they can spoil the game for everyone else. Because at this point, without looking for it, I have the entire Act 1 and Act 2 completely spoiled. Because I was scrolling through Twitter and I happened to see people just posting, oh my god, I can't believe this happened at the end of that one. I'm like, well, I was really looking forward to seeing that, you know, and actually being able to, like, play that. This is great, you know. Thanks for spoiling the fucking game, you asshole. This was fun. And especially for someone like me that only plays Diablo games for the story. I don't give a shit about the end game, run it over and over again and get gear. I don't care about that. I care about the story. Same with WoW, right? I just care about the story. When the story gets spoiled, it's really heartbreaking. Because that's the reason I want to play the fucking game, is because I want to play the story, and now it's been spoiled. So that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's really shitty. Don't get me wrong. I don't mind the fact that games are going to $70. I understand that inflation is a thing. I understand that games are far more expensive than what they've ever been before. I don't quite understand why we're now at $70, yet cash shops are still a thing and battle passes are still a thing, because apparently if they could charge $70, they wouldn't have to have those things. But never mind. I would even be okay with games going up to $80 if that is what they need to charge. And I don't really anymore give a shit about cash shops and stuff like that. As long as they're cosmetic, it doesn't really change much. And battle passes are also fine as long as they give something that's worth the money that you're getting for it. What I do mind is this early access BS. It's like, holy shit. I mean, why would you spoil your game for everyone that's looking forward to playing it? So that is kind of annoying. On to the good stuff, because I said there's a lot of things that stand out about Diablo 4 that I think a lot of people are sort of glossing over, and these are things that I've been saying for a really long time. So let's time travel very quickly, ladies and gentlemen, back like 3 years ago when Blizzard first started giving us information about what Diablo 4 was actively going to be. I called it Blizzard's new MMO, right? I said back then, this is an MMO. It looks like an MMO. It plays like an MMO. It's designed as an MMO, and there were people going, no, bro, it's not an MMO, it's just an ARPG. I would still like to extend a hand or a courtesy to anyone that says that it is just an ARPG and explain. I would want an explanation. What's the difference, right? If Diablo is not an MMO, then what's the fucking difference? In what way is Diablo not an MMO? You can play with a shit ton of people from around the world, right? And it's a world. The world is persistent. The world is always there. Your actions influence the world. And you can do dungeons with other players. You can do world bosses with other players. Like, how is it not an MMO? It's literally World of Warcraft with just an ARPG layout, right? An isometric view, but it's still World of Warcraft. And I said this, and it seems like Blizzard is really embracing it now. For the first time ever, we're seeing Blizzard spend so much more time. Did you guys see the Book of Lorath? Literally 4 video series. I haven't watched the 4th part yet. We'll do that on stream, probably tomorrow or the day after. I haven't watched the 4th book yet, but it's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. And it's lore. It's Diablo lore. It's allowing for new players to catch up, to learn exactly what we did in the first 3 games, and to, you know, sort of bridge that gap. Here's my prediction, and it's a bold one, I realize it, but here is my prediction. This is the last Diablo game that Blizzard will ever make. Just like World of Warcraft about 16, 17 years ago was the last World of Warcraft Blizzard ever made. From here, what we will see is expansion packs on top of Diablo 4, expansion packs that increase the world, that add new continents, add new areas of Sanctuary to explore, maybe even expansions that take us into, you know, away from Sanctuary, because technically speaking, the world is Blizzard's oyster, right? Blizzard can do anything in this world, and the world of Diablo lore is relatively underdeveloped. There's a lot of things that has just never been colored in, and I like the fact that Blizzard is spending so much. I played the beta for Diablo 4, and what I liked particularly is, first and foremost, everything is voice acted. The voice acting is phenomenal during the beta, and the cinematics are really cool. The story is really, really cool. So I genuinely believe that this is Blizzard's answer. And why I believe this, I guess I should just clarify. Years ago, this was 6, 7, 8 years ago, this was when Mike Morhaime was still with Blizzard Entertainment. Mike Morhaime was speaking about Project Titan, and why Project Titan was such an important project for Blizzard Entertainment. And Mike Morhaime said, World of Warcraft will not always exist. At some point, World of Warcraft will end. That's just the nature of video games. He wasn't saying that they're giving up on World of Warcraft or that they don't want to make World of Warcraft anymore. He was simply saying that all games have a natural shelf life. There's going to be a point where the player base will just simply move off of World of Warcraft. And the only answer there becomes, the only question becomes, where do they move to? Now, if you do not have an MMO that they can simply move to, you lose them to another MMO, right? They'll literally just leave and they'll go play something else, because there are other MMOs out there. The only answer, as far as Mike Morhaime was concerned, is you have to have an MMO within the ecosystem to which they can move. So you can literally just port them from World of Warcraft into Diablo or into Project Titan, and they stay within the ecosystem of Blizzard Entertainment. Obviously, Project Titan failed twice now, right? Because it just died a couple of weeks ago with the Overwatch drama. This leaves only Diablo 4. This is the only other MMO that Blizzard have currently in development that Blizzard can sort of hope to pick players up from. We of course have the survival game that hopefully we're going to learn a lot more of at BlizzCon. The survival game may actually also pull a bunch of players away from World of Warcraft should World of Warcraft go down. But, I mean, just to provide evidence that Blizzard isn't giving up on World of Warcraft, when's the last time, or when in the history of World of Warcraft have we ever had this much content flowing this fast into World of Warcraft? The answer is absolutely never. This is the most active that World of Warcraft has ever been. This is the most focused that World of Warcraft has ever been. And this leads us very nicely into the second, but the first story that I wanted to cover tonight, which is a Blizzard dev that was just fired about a few weeks ago due to jokes that he wrote for the video game. Now, at this point, most of you should have heard about this. If you haven't, welcome. I'll try and explain. All right, so there's a Blizzard developer. He was tasked with writing the jokes for the new Treasure Goblin. Every one of you should have seen the Treasure Goblin, right? He was supposed to write these jokes for these Treasure Goblins, and he came up with some relatively interesting jokes, but all of these jokes are very much in line with Goblin sort of lore and what the goblins are and their culture and how it works. Remember, the goblins are absolute fundamental corporatists, right? They run a very corporate setting. All of them are effectively slaves to the trade prince, who owns them in a way, and they work for this giant corporation which is called the Venture Co. Right? This is how the goblins operate their entire system. So these were jokes like, all according to my plan, another record quarter for revenue, finders, keepers, first try. I saw it first. I thought it was free for all. I've come in below estimates. There's another one here about looks like another yacht for me, right? So clearly, we've all made these jokes in the past, right? These are jokes that we've all made. This is things that we do that's just very generalized corporate jokes, right? This is how we view corporations. And if you think about the venture company, this is what they do, right? This is 100% what they do. The venture company, these are in line with, if I say to you, there's a character in World of Warcraft that says the following line, which character is it? And this was the line, right? Let's call this a cost of living adjustment. Instantly, who do you think says that? Like, if I gave you no other clues, I just said, this is the line, which character in World of Warcraft says that line? Your instant thought would be some kind of goblin. There's just no other way. It has to be some kind of goblin, because this is how the goblins would normally speak. Anyways, this developer was let go after Bobby Kotick obviously got attacked again, because he said some absolutely stupid shit about AI in the last week, at the height of the D4 release. Everyone's excited, everyone's looking forward to it. Bobby Kotick comes out, and it's almost like Bobby Kotick plans these things. As soon as something good happens for Blizzard Entertainment, and as soon as Blizzard is doing something that we can all agree with is gonna be a massive win, Bobby Kotick goes, right, now's the time for me to speak and basically destroy all of that goodwill. So Bobby Kotick is effectively a parasite. This is Blizzard, and this is Bobby Kotick, right? When Blizzard does something that makes the players happy, and there's a bit of goodwill from the player base for Blizzard, Bobby Kotick goes and he just sucks out that goodwill, right? And then he waits patiently. The man is very patient. Then Blizzard builds up another bit of goodwill. They have a great expansion launch. They have even more good patches going. Everything's going really well. And as soon as Blizzard have gotten fat with player love and affection and player goodwill, Bobby Kotick comes back in and he goes, yeah, I'll take that again for myself, right? So he just siphons off all of this fucking goodwill to spout bullshit, effectively. He came out and he said basically most of the issues of the lawsuits were completely conflated. They found no real evidence of widespread employee harassment and things like that, even though we all saw the actual investigations that found evidence of widespread employee intimidation and widespread employee harassment, right? The investigations show that they paid for, and Bobby Kotick goes, nah, I was overblown by a bunch of overzealous developers that wanted to make a name for themselves. Basically playing off the whole thing as it just didn't fucking happen, and it doesn't even matter. Players were just sort of losing their minds over nothing because a bunch of developers were trying to overthrow the company. Now, don't get me wrong, there were devs, and I made videos at the time of these devs. I remember one dev very specifically that ended up leaving Blizzard Entertainment and getting a job at some financial corporation. This one dev, for example, actively admitted that they had never gone through any sort of harassment whatsoever at Blizzard Entertainment, and yet they were constantly attacking Blizzard Entertainment even while working there for literally every single thing, right? Even things that really didn't, like, no one cared about, they would use this as their platform to gain fame and fortune and all the rest of it. But for the most part, most of the developers were really just trying to fix Blizzard Entertainment and make it a company where people could actually work and be proud of working. You're always going to have your bad apples, but the bad apples were far fewer than what Bobby Kotick seems to want to suggest. Anyway, so this developer gets fired because of these jokes, because apparently these jokes are just unacceptable as far as Bobby Kotick is concerned. He will not stand for it. No one will make jokes about the fact that he is a very greedy individual. And I do have to say, it's actually extra sad to me. And many of you might not understand why I say that, but it is actually extra sad to me. So, old Blizzard would have quite legitimately just copy-pasted the voice lines from the normal goblins, right? They would have taken a normal goblin, put it into the world, and just copy-paste a bunch of goblin voice lines and be done with it. It's a crossover event. Who gives a shit about doing effort for a crossover event? All you're doing really is you're sort of marketing Diablo in World of Warcraft to try and keep people within your ecosystem playing. New Blizzard actually goes through the effort of writing new jokes and new lines for a crossover event. Not even an event that's going to be consistent, that's going to always be there. It's a crossover. It's a timed crossover event, and they write brand new voice lines for this. You know, they actually spend the effort to try and sort of build out what the venture company is, what the goblins are like. And to see that developer then fired for the effort that they actually put into the game, it's a little sad. It's a little sort of, it's deflationary, because it just feels like, wow, I don't see how any of this, like, the only way you can look at this and say this was aimed at Bobby Kotick is if you realize that Bobby Kotick is a cunt, right? So the only way Bobby Kotick could think that these jokes were about him is because Bobby Kotick realized that he is a cunt. That's literally the only way. Because otherwise, this is so bog standard goblin saying things that no one, if you didn't know who Bobby Kotick was, no one would know that you were talking about Bobby Kotick here. That's just as simple as that. Yeah, he made it about him, Nix, and then fired the developer swiftly for it, which I think is just absolutely silly and disgusting. Anyways, enough about Bobby Kotick. The last thing I want is my channel banned because Bobby Kotick found, offense to something that I said about him. Bobby, if you're watching, love you, bro. You're doing a bang-up job at Activision Blizzard, by the way. And with that said, I think we'll move on. I want to talk about something that we actually discussed last week, but I've had a bit of a thought about it. So, you guys remember the conversation we had about the full world revamp in Azeroth, right? Will there be a world revamp? Balila obviously made videos on this. I believe Taliesin and Evital even hinted at stuff like this in one of their in one of their videos. And I basically said last week that I do not see Blizzard revamping the old world. There's just too much in it. Now, there was a bit of pushback on what I said there, because a lot of people suggested that no, it's clear that the old world is being revamped, or at least it seems like it's being done. And I want to talk about the only way in which I can see that happen. Slowly. Like, super slowly. Almost to the point of not noticeable at some points. For anyone that, and there's been a few people that made this argument, that's suggesting that, hey, we had a full world revamp during Cataclysm, there's no reason Blizzard can't do it now. There's about 8 expansions worth of reasons why Blizzard can't do a full world revamp at the moment. When Cataclysm was revamped, it was only one expansion that Blizzard had to revamp, and that was the original World of Warcraft that got revamped. If you wanted to revamp the old world now, you're revamping everything, right? That's all of the expansions from Cataclysm, effectively. Because, well, including Cataclysm, because you have to change Cataclysm, right? And then you have to change TBC, you have to change Wrath of the Lich King, you have to change Mists of Pandaria, Worlds of Draenor, Legion. Everything needs to change. That's a hell of a lot of work. And I don't see Blizzard ever really doing all of that. I personally, I don't even think Blizzard needs to revamp the world. And I know that that's going to come as a surprise to a lot of players that are looking forward to an old world that actually matters. And believe me, I want that too. But my current read on what Blizzard is doing, and I may be completely wrong, but I think Blizzard is resetting World of Warcraft with Dragonflight. I told you guys last week, I think from next expansion, players will start in Exile's Reach, they will instantly be ported to Dragonflight, and from there the story will begin. The old world would effectively exist as like a museum, right? If you wanted to go to the museum and you wanted to see the ancient history of WoW, you could play through the museum, but it's going to be retired for the most part. And what Blizzard will do then is really turn it into a theme park of sorts. So what I think Blizzard will do is they'll slowly but surely add world events to the old world, like for example the flying and maybe some new quest lines that people can do just sort of as a fun aside. I can see Blizzard doing that. I can even see Blizzard bringing some of the old dungeons like they've been doing, you know, getting those old dungeons updated and incorporating them into the Mythic Plus system, thereby keeping those dungeons alive in their own way, shape, you know, in their own little way. But I don't see Blizzard doing a full-blown revamp ever again. So the problem with a full-blown revamp is you're effectively talking about designing two different expansions at the exact same time, or a very long process of basically building two different expansions at the same time. Because the first thing you will have to do is you will have to create a story throughout the old world that is independent of the current story, but nevertheless fits nicely into the current story. Right? So the story has to start at point A, flow through point A, B, C, D, E, F, all the way to the current story, and it needs to feel natural. And with that, you have to introduce everything that you wish to introduce into the story, basically seamlessly. And then you also have to hope that players actually do want to level through that, and however long that takes. Because should Blizzard do a full world revamp, you can bet your ass they're going to want people to play through that world revamp. So that is going to be the new questing experience. It makes far more sense to me that Dragonflight be the new questing experience for World of Warcraft, mainly because if you play through Dragonflight and you pay any sort of attention, you will know all of the broad strokes of what is needed in order to play World of Warcraft. They deal with enough of the elements of the lore of previous expansions that you get a decent idea of this is WoW and this is how WoW operates, so it's fine. I don't see Blizzard doing the other thing, unless of course it's bit by bit. So effectively you tell players, hey, we're gonna have a full revamp, but it's only gonna happen in 6 years from now, and we're gonna start zone by zone. So every single expansion will do a couple of zones, revamp them in their fullness, and that's it. But I wanted to make that clear because a lot of people sort of thought I was just straight up saying there will never be a world revamp, it will never happen. I can see a world where Blizzard revamps the world. Don't get me wrong. I just don't see it as a likely scenario, just purely due to how much Blizzard would have to revamp. It's kind of nuts, the amount of content that will have to be revamped as a result of that. So, you know, just laying that to rest. Hopefully people don't take it as me saying you'll never get your revamped world. I do think Blizzard is spending more time now. Look at Kalimdor, the new flying thing that's coming in Kalimdor. That right there is what we've always been asking for. A reason to go to the old world. Not a forced reason. I don't want to be forced to going to the old world, but I do want reasons to go to the old world. And things like the Kalimdor racing, like the ability to dragon ride in other zones, those are reasons to go back to the old world. Now all we need is, you know, maybe a couple of storylines in the old world that you know, is for new players. So a thing that I can see Blizzard doing is, in order to catch players up. So imagine, for example, we're in Dragonflight. Next expansion comes out, we go to that expansion, but then suddenly there's a side quest. The side quest sends the players to Silithus. The player has to go to the old version of Silithus and basically play through a quick storyline that introduces the player to Cthulhu and to the happenings of back in the day with the Silithid and Silithus and the old gods and things like that. Maybe another quick storyline sending players back to Storm Peaks, and the player learns about Yogg-Saron and what Yogg-Saron did and what the players had to do in order to defeat Yogg-Saron. Small storylines, updated and upgraded for max level side quests that introduce the player to a version of the old world that they probably didn't play through because it's an old world and who gives a shit, right? No one's going to play through it. You can do the same thing with the Lich King. You can do the same thing with Malfarion. There's a lot of room for that. And technically speaking, while not exactly a full rework of the old world, it does bring the old world back, right? It gives the old world a reason to exist, and more specifically, it gives us a reason to go to the old world, which makes World of Warcraft just overall feel more full, more like a proper world, rather than just instanced versions of sort of loosely based worlds on top of each other. Anyways, enough of the gameplay elements and stuff like that. As always, ladies and gentlemen, I will get to your questions and your opinions and stuff at the end of the show when we do the viewer discussions. That's live, by the way. So if you're watching this over on on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any of those, you obviously don't get those. So you need to join us live on YouTube if you want that. Let's talk about Fate. First question I will ask is, what is Fate in World of Warcraft? It's a problem that I've been struggling with quite a bit because it's one of the scripts that I'm currently writing, is how Fate intervenes and works within World of Warcraft. You all remember the Fate scribes from Shadowlands, as well as the brokers that we met in Zereth Mortis, where they speak about how our coming was foretold, how they knew, how this is all going according to plan, how the first ones predicted all of these events to play out. And one of the questions we've had, specifically in sort of lore circles, is to what extent does our decisions matter in World of Warcraft? If Fate decides, does it matter what we choose? And that's a real thing, right? Because if Fate is the absolute be-all, end-all of the world, then my choices and your choices and really nothing matters. All of our actions do not matter because Fate has determined it will be so. Now, luckily, Steve Denuser gave us an answer to what Fate in World of Warcraft actually is. And it's more... How do I even begin to explain this? The way that I read it, or the way that I took his explanation. From his explanation, I can only gather that Fate is an actual being. It's an actual thing. It's a thing that drives a specific narrative, and it wants this specific narrative regardless of anything. So it wants to get from point A to point B. Now, you and I can choose to skip point B and go straight to point C, but Fate will consistently interfere in order to eventually get us to point B. Because at the end of the day, we need to get to point B. So it doesn't matter what pathway we take, in that we have full freedom, but Fate will effectively force us back to point B, because that is where we need to be. That's how I view it. And the only way that can work is if Fate is an actual being. If there's an actual being of Fate, some sister of Fate, or some prophet of Fate, or some like wheel of fate or whatever the case may be, but there is something that controls our fates. And there's a number of, let's call it, pieces of evidence within the game that I think strengthen my position. The first one I'll bring up, but there are many other points of this. Actually, the first one I'll bring up is one that I didn't even think I was going to bring up, but Illidan. As fate willed it, Illidan was meant to be the child of light and shadow that would effectively save the world. Right? The light have their own prophecies of Illidan becoming a warrior of the light and saving the world. So technically speaking, that is written within Illidan's fate. Insofar as even Zira abuses Illidan against his will to effectively take his freedom and turn him into a warrior of the light. Illidan, of course, resists this prophecy. He refuses to give in to this prophecy and instead remains the child of Fel, killing Zira, and eventually he helps us take down Sargeras, or bring Sargeras back to the fold so that Sargeras can be imprisoned. One could argue, well, clearly there is choice. Illidan made a choice. He didn't want to be a warrior of the light, and therefore, you know, he went against what fate wanted. But as fate would have it, Illidan didn't go against fate. And this is what broke my brain when I started to think about this. The prophecy of the light is how the light interpreted fate. It's not fate. The light's prophecy was not fate. The light's prophecy was that Illidan would become a warrior of light because Illidan, the child of light and shadow, would save us all. And according to the light, that is Illidan becoming the light, a child of light and shadow. But with Illidan keeping the Fel, he is in effect now the true child of light and shadow, because how did Fel create itself? It was created through the amalgamation of light and void, light and shadow. Where those clashed fiercest, void was created. Illidan, quite literally, the child of light and shadow, by being ingratiated within the Fel. So the light's prophecy, they tried to interfere with fate because they wanted fate to be on their side so that Illidan would ultimately save them from Sargeras. Now, the next one, which is a little bit more contentious, and you'll see why, Ysera's death. So there's been a number of questions. I want to ask chat right now because I can see you guys in chat just waiting. So I want to ask you guys, where do dragons go upon their deaths? This is a question that's been keeping me up for quite some time. Where do dragons go upon their deaths? What is it that a dragon returns to or becomes part of when they die? Some people claim that it is the Shadowlands because of Ysera. Some people, like in chat now, there's people saying the Emerald Dream. Okay. That's not a bad guess. I can absolutely see how you would get to the Emerald Dream. I have changed my mind entirely on where the dragons go when they die. And my mind was changed in a number of ways. The first thing that made me realize that dragons do not go to the Shadowlands was in trying to get Ysera back. When the green dragon wishes to sacrifice themselves for Ysera, the Winter Queen refuses. Your kind does not belong here. The fairies in Ardenweald were absolutely in awe of seeing a dragon for the very first time. They had never seen a dragon before. When Ysera was born and she came out of that egg thing, they were awestruck at just the majesticness of this dragon that they had never seen before. So I believe that's evidence enough that the dragons don't go to the Shadowlands, specifically considering that Elune herself interfered with Ysera. And before any of you fucking come at me going, well, Elune had to interfere because otherwise Ysera would have ended up in the Maw. No. That is wrong. When did Ysera die? At the beginning of Legion. When did the Arbiter go offline? At the end of Legion. If Elune did not interfere with Ysera at all, and Ysera actually went into the Shadowlands, Ysera would have ended up in... no one knows. Clearly not Ardenweald. Otherwise, if she were to end up in Ardenweald, Elune would have done nothing. She would have just let Ysera go. Because that's where dragons go. So that was my first sort of... the thing that raised some questions for me about where dragons go. The second was actually from Senegos and his passing. And this was really the thing that I think capped it for me at where dragons go. We see Senegos doing what very few dragons have done in a very long time. A peaceful passing. How does Senegos pass? How does he die? He flies into the ley lines. Those arcane surges that's coming up there, that's where the ley lines are. He flies into the ley lines and the ley lines absorb his essence. Now, think, what is the blue Dragonflight? What were they given? They were given dominion over the ley lines of Azeroth. Their power comes directly from the ley lines of Azeroth. So when Senegos died, his soul, his body, became the very fuel that his flight will now use in order to defend Azeroth. This suggests that when a black dragon dies, their body forms part of Azeroth. It becomes part of the rocks and the mountains and the oceans, the water, the grass, the leaves. It becomes part of Azeroth because the black dragons draw power from Azeroth herself. When a bronze dragon dies, their souls become part of the time waves, the sands of time, which there further allows their flight to draw power from the power that they had sacrificed. When a red dragon dies, they become part of the life pools, where their essence will empower the next generation of red dragons. You see, dragons were plucked out of the cycle. They are not part of the cycle. They were plucked out of it, and they became unto themselves a cycle within themselves. That's my speculation, at least. It's a never-ending cycle where those that had lived long enough sacrificed themselves eventually to become part of the power for the next generation, and so on and so forth. This is perhaps another reason why the dragons of normal were never gifted immortality, and why the aspects have never chosen to gift their dragons immortality. Think about this. We know how the elves, the night elves specifically, achieved immortality. It was through the gifts of the aspects. So clearly, the aspects have the ability to gift their dragons immortality. And yet they do not. Why don't they? Because it's essential for their cycles that the dragons die, because their bodies become part of the cycle again that fuels the next elements of their existence. This is not where protodrakes go, by the way. This has nothing to do with protodrakes. This is only about the normal dragons, FYI. Or the order-infused dragons, if you will. But this, again, brings me back to Fate. Because there's a few pieces of interesting things in 10.1.5. I don't know if you guys have seen the sort of pictures and stuff with Verisa, Windrunner, Uther, Thessarian. Did you guys see those? If you haven't, I'll quickly bring it up on screen here. This is Verisa Windrunner in 10.1.5. Verisa Windrunner, the Banshee Queen. You have Uther, the Deathbringer. And you have Thessarian, Hand of the King. All of them undead, by the way. The question becomes, why? Now, this is part of timeline stuff, so don't worry. They're not becoming actual undead creatures in our timeline. This, I believe, is part of the Bronze Dragonflight questline that's going to send us through time, and we're going to see different timelines play out. But what was interesting to me is Verisa Windrunner, the Banshee Queen. And immediately it made me think, Sylvanas Windrunner was fated to be the Banshee Queen. It is what she is. She is the Banshee Queen. Right? It was chosen, and she played that role perfectly well. But in a different timeline, where something may have happened to Sylvanas, maybe Sylvanas died before she could be turned into a Banshee Queen, maybe Sylvanas didn't go out to face Arthas when he attacked, and it was actually Verisa that went out. In that timeline, Fate chose a different Windrunner. So Fate may be far more interested in bloodlines than what Fate is necessarily interested in the individual. So it will always happen as it happens. Uther still touched by death. The only difference is Uther does not pass into the Shadowlands. Uther remains and is raised as a Death Knight. Still touched by death. He still needs to die. That is still Fate's path for him. He must die. But Fate does not mind what happens afterwards. Uther becoming a Deathbringer is fine, as long as Uther dies at the hands of death, so to speak. Thessarian, on the other hand, Hand of the King. Which king? What happened to Turalian? Why is the Alliance ruled by, at least to some extent, why is the Hand of the Alliance king a Death Knight? That also looks a little surprised at the fact that he is the Death Knight that rules the king, but that might just be the facial expression, right? Also, very cool armor, if I do say so myself. But it's interesting. So what do we know about Fate? We know that Fate is not innately written, so it's not written in stone. We do have some control over it. It appears as if Fate cares far more about bloodlines than what it necessarily cares about the individual. So as long as a Windrunner becomes Death and a Windrunner becomes Shadow, Fate doesn't care too much about exactly which one becomes which. It just has to be a Windrunner. That's the only thing that is really important as far as Fate is concerned. And again, we go back to the Ysera storyline. Ysera dies, goes to Ardenweald. We want to get Ysera back. The Green Dragon wants to sacrifice himself. He's told, nope, you can't be here. And Fate goes, Malfurion. It was his... He should have died on that day. And while I was perfectly happy with Ysera, and, you know, Ysera was here, she stayed here, and that was perfectly fine. If you want to make the switch, I need him. Malfurion didn't have to do it, FYI. Malfurion could absolutely, especially with how things played out. When I think about it, I still don't quite understand the purpose of that story. Huh. Literally just realized that. So, we go to Ardenweald. We ask the Winter Queen to give us Ysera back because we need the green aspect back. The Winter Queen doesn't want to do it. Eventually, she swindles us out of one Malfurion for Ysera. Not the greatest of trades, but never mind that. And then Ysera just goes, I can't be the aspect anymore. My daughter will have to do it. Saying, your daughter was here all along. We could have just gone to her straight away. Like, you could have just told us in Ardenweald, guys, no, I'm not coming back because, you know, my daughter can do it, and also because I've been touched by death, I can no longer be the aspect of the dream. So, you know, good luck. Tell Marithra I love her. Right? Ysera could have absolutely just told us that, and that would have been sufficient. It would have been fine. So I don't know if I quite understand why Malfurion had to be sacrificed for Ysera, or even why Ysera was being brought back. The only thing I can think of is Blizzard have some massive story planned for Ysera. My current thinking is that Ysera is going to be the aspect of Elune, because we clearly know that Elune has something to do with the Realms of Death. There is some link between Ysera and Elune and Death, because her sister is the Winter Queen. And Ysera specifically says, I can no longer be the aspect of the dream because I've been touched by death. Which suggests Ysera is like perfect to become an aspect of Elune. Perhaps a brand new Dragonflight. On top of the infinite Dragonflight that we discussed. When was this? Thursday? Friday? In one of the videos? I can see that as a thing that can happen. But as far as Fate goes, you guys can expect me to talk about it a lot more in the coming weeks and months, because Fate fascinates me. It's absolutely fascinating to me, the way Fate operates and the way Fate influences things in World of Warcraft in a way that isn't direct, because Steve Denuser himself said, just because it was foretold in the prophecies does not make it so. The prophecies are written by the first ones, but we can change it. We do have the ability to just not go with the prophecies if we so choose. But it seems like no matter what we do, no matter which choices we make, we always eventually end up back at what Fate planned for us. And it's going to be very interesting how, in the changing of World of Warcraft, how that is going to be sort of play, like how Blizzard's going to play with that. I guess that does sort of lead into what will make the final topic of tonight. I'm going to leave the end of the aspects conversation for next week, because I just realized a couple of things that I have not thought about yet in enough detail to actually have that discussion. There's a couple of whispers from the old gods that I want to go recheck, and specifically just need some time to think if they could apply to anything else. But there's a lot of strong evidence right now in World of Warcraft that the end of the dragon aspects may actually come very soon, but it's not going to be in the way that most people think it's going to be. I want to talk finally about the new World of Warcraft direction. Specifically how the story operates in World of Warcraft. Can I ask, just by show of hands in chat, how many of you are happy with the current story of World of Warcraft? It's really good. Then we go, how you doing, bro? Soldier, hand, happy as fuck. Me, extremely happy, but I was also happy during BFA and Shadowlands. BFA story was actually pretty good. Shadowlands, it was dog crap, but not too happy. Interesting. We have to talk about that after the show, Cassis. I want to hear why. So good so far, and Dragonflight, yeah, but past stuff, no. And I'm happy, better than SA. All right, so there has been a fundamental shift in how World of Warcraft has been set up. In the past, the way World of Warcraft has pretty much always operated itself has been, and we can sort of call this Metzen's WoW versus the Noozer's WoW. In Metzen's WoW, there were a couple of things that were constant throughout the world. So the first was that there are no good guys or bad guys in the world as far as mortals are concerned. So in Metzen's WoW, humans, or the Horde and the Alliance, were neither good nor evil. They were simply opponents of one another, right? And they were always going to be opponents of one another. That's how Metzen set it up. That's how Metzen wanted it. Then the mortals of Azeroth would be loosely in an alliance with Order, the Titans and the Titan Keepers, with Light, Paladins, Priests, and then with Life, Druids, Shamans, and the like. They would have a very strained alliance with the Foul through Warlocks, but the Foul would also be one of its ultimate enemies. So too would Death, and so too would the Void. These were the enemy classes, and the other three were the friendly classes, the alliances. Steve the Noozer seems to have changed that vision fundamentally. So the first thing that went the way of the dodo bird when Steve the Noozer took over was this war between the Horde and the Alliance. I know that Blizzard still pretends like the Horde and the Alliance really matters, and Ian still said this is a sort of fundamental pillar of World of Warcraft, the Horde v Alliance, but the truth is, from a canonical standpoint, the Horde and Alliance no longer matters. They no longer make sense, especially now that you can actually do dungeons and raids with players from opposite factions, and that you can be in a guild with players from the opposite faction. This just destroys the idea of the Horde versus Alliance, I think, forever. I think there's fundamentally never going to be another expansion where you can actually have the Horde and the Alliance fight each other, because you're effectively, like, your guild mate that you just did a dungeon with is of the opposite faction. The expansion is trying to tell you, oh, you should hate this guy because, you know, you're at war with him. Shall we queue up for a quick dungeon before we get back to hating each other? Doesn't work. It doesn't operate. It does not compute. It doesn't exist in the same world. I do think Blizzard is sort of slowly getting the players there, but they don't want to, like, this is basically PR. Blizzard is saying Horde v Alliance still very important, don't worry about it, because they know if they come out right now and say, no, all of it over, the player base will simply lose their minds, right? There's going to be a bunch of people on Twitter screaming at the top of their lungs, how dare you, how dare you, how dare you. This is a nice way for Blizzard to sort of go, we'll get there, but not just yet. Right? The Horde and the Alliance is dead. It's just over. You guys can forget about the Horde and the Alliance right now. There is no more factions in World of Warcraft. There is only Azerothians. There is only the mortals of Azeroth. These are the only... This is the only faction that really matters. Instead, what Steve the Noozer has done is very particularly, he has started the unwind process between the alliances, between us and Order, us and Life, us and Light. If you think back to Light, how Yril is sort of portrayed during the alternative Draenor storyline, portrayed as very fascistic, right? And dangerous, and no one really wants that future for Azeroth. That was the first moments that Light was really portrayed as not the greatest. Then you have the Illidan storylines, right? Where the Light wants to basically grape Illidan into becoming a warrior of light. Another one of those, never mind, right? The Light might not actually be as good as you might think. And then we now have the beginnings of Shadow of Dragonflight, where it's becoming clearer and clearer that the Titans have lied to us. The Titan Keepers are lying to us consistently. Steve the Noozer's new WoW is setting up us versus them. And by us, I mean Azeroth versus everything else. So in other words, no faction or no cosmological force is a friend. Some cosmological forces are worse than others, but they are all pretty bad in their own respects. That's the new direction for World of Warcraft, and I think players need to accept that. Now, for those players that think this is horrible, I'm here to tell you it really isn't. In fact, it could actually be a really cool thing. It could actually be a really good thing. And the reason it creates a lot more stories, creates a lot more opportunity for stories, because you're no longer limited to basically only 3 sort of cosmic forces. You can now have cosmic forces go to war with each other. So imagine, for example, next expansion, we travel to a new planet. Something happens in Dragonflight that sends us on a wild hunt to a brand new planet in the Great Beyond, and we get on the spaceship and we fly there. When we get there, this planet is a planet that has been absolutely torn apart by the Horde and by the Void and the Light in their eternal conflict. This planet is being torn apart by the forces of the Light and the Void. They have been fighting to the point where the local populace is being decimated as a result of this. And we arrive to basically stop both the Void and the Light. It just provides so many more stories. You can have the first raid be a raid where we attack the Light, right? And all the bosses are made up of Light generals. The very next raid, we attack the Void, and it's all made up of Void generals and Void creatures. And maybe the last raid, the Void and the Light actually teams up, trying to stop us from kicking them off the planet. And the last raid is sort of an amalgamation of the Void and the Light, with maybe the demons getting involved in that war as well. You basically just have this freedom now to tell an unlimited amount of story. Whereas in the past, the story would sort of be driven by himself. Now, for players that's immediately thinking, but Accolonn, what happens to paladins and priests and mages and all the rest if, you know, the Light is no longer a friend or an ally? The answer is nothing. Take Tyr, for example. Tyr is a Titan keeper of order. Right? He serves order. We know he serves order first because he told us, but also even the old god minion Zaraj that he fought called him of order, right? Said order is not immune to betrayal. So we know that he forms part of the forces of order. Yet, Tyr uses light magic. How is that possible? Well, it's simple. The cosmic forces of the universe are two things at the same time. They are first high magic, so they are magic that can be wielded by any who try or have the affinity for it, but they are also forces in and of themselves. So, for example, the Light can either be wielded by paladins and priests for its own gain, or in service to the army of the Light, but these two things are not mutually exclusive. You do not need to be part of the army of the Light in order to wield the Light. You can absolutely wield the Light and be in opposition to the Light. If that makes sense. Sargeras is a good example of this. A Titan of Order, served on the Pantheon, embraced the Foul, and how did Sargeras defeat his Titan brothers and sisters when they came to stop him? Now remember, Sargeras stood alone against all of the Titans. They all came to stop him, and he beat them. How did he beat them? By wielding Foul. You see, the Titans have a natural weakness to Foul. Foul is sort of their arch enemy, if you will. It's their greatest weakness. So by wielding Foul, he was able to take out all of his brothers and sisters. But if the way people want to see it is you need to be part of in order to. That's not necessary, right? No, you don't need that. You can absolutely have foul magic and not be part of the foul faction. Illidan is a brilliant example of this. Uses the foul, fights the demons, right? Doesn't have to be part of the foul's armies in order to use foul. He can just do it. And I think that's true for all of it. But people need to embrace the new direction for World of Warcraft, because I do not believe... I don't think that direction is changing anytime soon. I think the direction itself is fairly strong. I think Blizzard have seen tremendous success with that strategy. And so I genuinely don't see Blizzard changing that strategy. No, not anytime soon. I highly doubt that it would happen. Anyways, that's the end of the show. Remember, we're gonna continue with the live portion of the show. So if you're watching this over on Spotify or anywhere else where you get your podcast, you want to join the YouTube live in order to be part of the discussion afterwards. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, follow, like, do all of that crazy shit. And I'll see all of you next week. Peace out, fam. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am all yours. How you guys doing? Ribcage, how you doing? Zix, how you doing? Luja, how you doing? Domago, how you doing? Regular Gaming, how you doing, bro? Is everyone doing well? Yeah, DK's obviously dead, right? Now that you guys can talk, now you're not talking. What the fuck's going on? You guys could speak earlier, but now that I can actually respond, now everyone's just sort of quiet and going, nah, I don't think I'll say anything. It's fine. Cassis, by the way, why don't you like the new story? DJ and King? Yeah, I appreciate it. Jane, how you doing? Drink pause. Can't wait to play Diablo 4 after I install an additional SSD in my PC. Oh, shit. That's harsh. Why do you need an additional SSD? Just delete something. Killing the goblins, playing Battlefront 2, sorry. Ace, that's perfectly fine. How you doing, brother? Nix, how you doing? Trying to sleep with your voice being soothing at the moment. This is a new... Thank you. I appreciate the compliment. Also, a little bit insulting. It suggests I'm boring enough that I put you to sleep. Do you think they will ever do something about the Helm of Domination again? No. I think that story is over. I think Blizzard made it very clear they wanted to be done with Arthas as quickly as possible, and basically everything to do with Arthas as quickly as possible. The fact that they turned him into 35 anima suggests they're over, right? He's over. I also think as someone that loves Arthas and loves his legacy, I don't want them to touch Arthas again. Just leave him. It's over, right? Let's just move on. Let's go to new stories. It's clear that this was written long ago by people that actually loved that story specifically. The new Blizzard staff just may not like that story all that much, or maybe they don't understand that story all that much. That's fine, right? But leave Arthas where he is. He had a wonderful story in World of Warcraft. He's still, to my mind, one of the greatest villains that ever existed in World of Warcraft, and I think that's fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. I prefer the classic Warcraft themes. The new direction hasn't done much for me, just adds more stuff to the mystery box. The game is better now, so that's what I'm playing for. I don't necessarily, Cassis Belly, I don't necessarily agree. Actually, I do agree with you, but I think at the same time, we will have to talk in about a year from now. I will be able to tell you exactly how much I love Dragonflight in about a year from now. Because Blizzard is clearly playing the very, very long game, where they're setting up a bunch of stories, and those stories will come to an end at the end of the expansion, or some of them will come to an end at the end of the expansion. This will either be highly successful, and we will have great times seeing the conclusion to many of those storylines, or it will be a complete and utter clusterfuck. And you know, players will be super outraged and angry by it. At the end of the day, there's no real way of knowing which which is which, right? We just won't know. So it remains to sort of be seen there. Hey man, do you think if Kil'jaeden knew that by destroying the Lich King, the portal to Shadowlands would open when he asked Illidan to do it? Because if it would happen, we would be troubled. It wasn't the destroying of the Lich King that opened the portal. It was the destroying of the Helm. Now, King Kil'jaeden may have known, but it's more likely that he didn't have a clue. The reason they were angry with Arthas wasn't because they just wanted Arthas gone. The reason they were angry was because the Lich King wasn't doing what they made the Lich King, or why they made the Lich King. Remember, Sargeras wanted the Lich King to prepare Azeroth for his invasion. But then when he finally invaded, the Lich King was doing his own fucking thing. Irrespective of whatever the hell the demons wanted to do, the Lich King was effectively building his own army for something. This pissed Sargeras and Kil'jaeden off to no end, because in their mind, they created this Lich King. And this Lich King wasn't playing by the rules. So I think the far more likelier was, go kill the Lich King, get the Helm, and then we'll crown a new Lich King. One that will actually help us with this invasion. So I don't know necessarily if they knew. I don't know. I want to find out what is to come as foreshadowed by N'Zoth and Zuvul. You and me both. I think that's the one thing that almost all of us wants to find out. What is to come? The easy or sort of lazy answer is that it's something to do with the Void. Everything in this expansion seems to point to the Void coming. You have the giant gaping hole right now in Aberys, right? Literally leading into the Void. You have the Oath Stones that is just so clearly the Five Lanterns now darkened, right? You have so many references to the old gods in the Void. You have the infinite Dragonflight being poised to come back, Murazond. Murazond's entire creation leads to the creation of the Hour of Twilight. All of it points to an old god victory. And what are the old gods all about? What is it that the old gods want to do? They want to bring about the Void Lords. That's it. That's their only goal. That has only ever been their goal. They have no other goals. The old gods do not dream of conquering Azeroth. They do not dream of creating a Void Titan as people think. The old gods, in my opinion, their only goal has ever been to bring about a Void Lord, to allow for the Void Lords to arrive on Azeroth in their fullness. The Void Lords themselves will do the rest. That is... It's all hinted at that is what's coming. Now, you could lazily say that's what Zuvul and N'Zoth was pointing to with the what is to come. Is the Void, and that we will never be ready for the Void ultimately arriving. But there is a world in which there can actually be even bigger things outside of our galaxy, and that is the thing that they're really afraid of. So it's not even the Void, it's stuff that's even more powerful than the Void that they're actually afraid of, right? Regular Gamer, Resend, what if all cosmic powers have been corrupted by an anti-clockmaker? And that's why you can have Nazi light army, but also good paladins, same with other cosmic forces. So... no, because the cosmic powers act only ever within their personalities. Like, so the problem with introducing an anti-clockmaker is we don't even necessarily have evidence of a clockmaker. The only evidence we have of a clockmaker that's ever been introduced in the game is an interview with Ian Azikostas where he said, the clockmaker, right? That's the only evidence we've ever had of a clockmaker. It's never been referenced within the game itself. The furthest back our references in-game go is the first ones. From a canonical standpoint, it is only the first ones that exist. The Clockmaker does not exist. Now we're introducing an anti-Clockmaker. That just convolutes the story even more. I don't even want us to have a Clockmaker to begin with, because I think a Clockmaker really brings about just a new set of convolution that the story, quite frankly, just doesn't need. I don't necessarily, unless the Clockmaker turns out to be something like Azeroth, right? In which case, nice twist, and maybe that can offer a bit more depth to Azeroth's character. But technically speaking, I don't think you necessarily need that. All of the cosmological forces act quite literally how you would expect them to act. The light being sort of very heavily modeled after the church, so to speak, very one-dimensional in their thinking, very like, this is what we do and this is the only thing we do, and we don't allow for anything else to happen outside of this very narrow view of things. So yeah, I ultimately, I don't think you need them to be corrupted as well. There is a world in which I can see a corruption of the cosmological forces, but it plays out, in my opinion, differently. So yeah. N'Zoth states he's the only one who can save us from what is to come, and Zaval states that a cosmos divided can't stop what is to come. I don't think they're referring to the Void personally. They could be referring to two different things. Right? They could very easily be referring to two different things. Because their enemies would not necessarily be the same. But the fact that both of them say the same thing, you could say there is something even more powerful and more scary out there that isn't actually part of our cosmological forces, and that is the thing that they all know is to come. Certainly possible. It is possible. Back in Shadowlands, I thought Oribos was about the infinite dragons and Morazon Nosdormu chasing himself through time in an eternal loop. Vernoth looks like the Winter Queen's pet, like Ysera being Elun's. Vernoth is an interesting character. The only reason people think Vernoth looks like the Winter Queen's pet is because they kind of look similar. But I don't know if... I think people are maybe reading a little bit too much into that. They definitely have similar features, but the Winter Queen has never displayed any ability to influence water, right? Or be part of the water element. So I don't think there's anything deeper in Vernoth than just there's some similarities between her and the Winter Queen. As if maybe they were the first ones, not because they came first, but because they traveled so far back. Possible. Definitely possible. If cosmic powers would be working only for their own good, why then users of Foul were capable of using it against the Burning Legion, just like other cosmic powers can? Bird Gamer, what do you mean? I mean, I already explained that. Nostalgia, take care of yourself, enjoy swimming. I mean, I genuinely already explained that. So, you have the cosmic power, and then you have the army of the cosmic power. The cosmic power is just a source of magic. Anyone can channel that source of magic. Some people better than others, but anyone can. It quite literally... So, take Illidan, for example. Illidan was trained to be a druid. And while he could do druid things... Arcane came much more naturally to him, and he was much more gifted in the use of Arcane. Doesn't mean he couldn't be a druid. He could have been. He would just never have been as powerful as a druid as he ended up being as a mage, and then ultimately, you know, as a demon hunter. But it's not like they can't. Arthas, for example, was actually very bad at channeling the light. He had to force himself to become a paladin. It took very long, and the light would just never respond to him. So, you know, there's evidences of this. These are simply magical sources. The forces of those magical forces, they are forces that have completely ingratiated themselves into those forces. So they do not deviate at all. They serve. The demons, for example, do not use magic from other sources. They are of Foul, and the powers they use are of Foul, and only of Foul, right? Because they are the forces of Foul. But again, someone like Kil'jaeden, for example, could probably use magic from any of the other sources if he so chose. I inspire myself better on Discord because 200 liters is not enough here. Also, lore-wise, people can use Domingo. That's very true. I want to see a Lightforged Falguard now. I see it as like we are, as humans are made of water and flesh. That doesn't make us immune to a punch from another flesh being. It doesn't make immune to drowning in water. The stronger force wins. Lucia, that's a pretty fucking good way of looking at it, actually. That's actually a pretty sort of rudimentary but very effective way of looking at it. I think any warlock is capable of using mage abilities because I remember Foul is just chaotic arcane. Yes, to some extent, although warlocks wouldn't really use arcane abilities because, technically speaking, warlocks took arcane and then dove into Foul because there was more power to be sort of gained from Foul. So, Ordradros, the Foul would be almost inherently the only exception to all of the cosmological forces, only because of how the Foul was created, and that's only if the Titans are right. Foul was created through the clashing of light and void. Therefore, it is entirely plausible that some beings of Foul will have the ability to channel void magic. Even though I believe it was Steve Denuser, or it may actually have been Chris Metzen back in the day, that explained that void walkers that warlocks summon aren't from the void. They are from Foul. They are demons. And even though they are called void walkers and they look like void, they are part of Foul. They're not actually part of the void. But this could just be due to the unique way of how they were created. Why are warlocks the base class? Just because their story is the craziest. Yeah, easier to wield. The thing with Arcane, what makes... In order to wield Arcane, you need a lot more study. You need to go through a lot more practice. Foul is easier in that regard because all you have to do is open yourself to the Twisting Nether and you will get it. The problem that warlocks have is trying to stop the corruption from taking over. So as a warlock, you need a lot more mental fortitude. You need to be able to resist at all times and also fight back at all times because the Twisting Nether is constantly trying to seep into your mind. The next warlock, I feel DKs are better. From a lore perspective, DKs are the strongest class in the game. From a lore perspective. So if we were purely focusing on lore, remember, now again, depends on which, we're talking about the DKs that was basically designed and raised by the Lich King. Not the original Death Knights that came from... what's his face? They came from Gul'dan, right? So we're talking about the original DK. Or we're talking about the DK from Arthas. They were effectively created to fight the mortals of Azeroth, right? That was their creation. So Arthas effectively, much like Batman, gave them abilities that would directly counter anything any of the other classes in the game could throw at them. Anti-magic shell, for example, strangulate, that anti-magic zone that they have. They have that icebound fortitude thing that they can pop that makes them basically immune to any sort of physical damage. The ability to heal from damage being taken. So DKs were designed as the ultimate anti-class, right? That doesn't... And they have rune blades. They make their own rune blades. Rune blades learn as they fight. So the more they fight, the better they become at fighting. So technically speaking, from a lore perspective, there is no class in the game that can beat a DK. The only class that can actually come close would be a paladin, but again, a DK was fundamentally designed to counteract a paladin. So if the paladin plays it really well, the paladin can win. But the paladin has to be perfect. The paladin can really not fuck up. Now, I do not think a DK is more powerful than an evoker. No, they were designed to be. Evokers are pretty strong, but I still think DKs would beat evokers. I mean, any spellcaster has a fundamental problem with DKs. Like, any spellcaster has one problem with a DK. Anti-magic shell. And remember, in-game, anti-magic shell has a cooldown and also has a duration. Canonically, it doesn't. As long as the DK can remain focused, they can channel anti-magic shell. You guys get what I'm saying, right? So, also Zixix, by the way, thanks for the $5, man. Really appreciate that. Evokers are made before Threat of DK was known. Yeah, but evokers were also very much created for a singular purpose. We just don't yet know exactly why Nalfarian designed them. DK, disarm, mortal strike, execute, boom, dead again, GG. Not lore-wise. So it's weird when you start looking at the lore. It's very difficult to actually really rank all of the classes, but like canonically speaking, that's the point I was making. From a canon standpoint, DKs are the strongest class. Ice Trap without PvP Trinket, etc. But in lore, Marksman Hunter can probably defeat a DK, even the Lich King, as we saw in the cinematic. No, remember, first and foremost, XX, you're... So, Bolvar was never truly the Lich King. He never embraced the powers of the Lich King. And also, again, you're talking about two fundamentally different things, right? How do they counter warlocks? Anti-magic shell. Have you ever been a warlock trying to fight a fucking DK? That little green, it's not anti, what's that green aura shit that they put around them that basically just fucks you? Like, none of your dots hit. Is it anti-magic shell? The green one. Anyways, they get this green shield. And that is, yeah. That is, that's like end of the game, right? And again, canonically speaking, they can keep that up forever. As long as they can gain focus and keep focus, they can keep it up. So the Warlock would have to distract the DK, fear the DK, and then kill the DK. Now, technically speaking, canonically, Warlocks are also incredibly powerful just due to their crowd controlling effects. The fact that they can effectively keep you completely stunned forever makes them super powerful, and their tools are also very good. But I still don't... I wouldn't put them as, like, even second most powerful. DKs might consider learning and using Generation 1 DK abilities. I don't know. I don't know how Blizzard would approach that. Is it possible that after a person becomes a DK, they still has access to their old magics? Like if a Warlock becomes a DK? Zixix, no. From the lore, it doesn't. When the Lich King raises you into undeath, that necromancy strips you of all that you were before. You become a DK, right? So it's a bit of a different... It's different to how Sylvanas raised people from the dead. So it's two different ways in which they raise people. Sylvanas simply brought you back to life through necromancy. The Lich King brings you back to life, but then ties you to his will, and that turns you into a DK. domination magic absolutely plays a role in how DKs operate. They are... So, canonically, if we remove Bolvar, canonically, what did the Lich King do to the DKs that he raised? He enslaved them to his will. They had no choice. They did what they were told to do. That's canonically how DKs were created. All of you remember the original DK playthrough. How many of you made the original DK when the original playthrough thing was with Arthas and sort of following Arthas's rules and orders? You had no choice. You had to do exactly... It wasn't until you got to the church and Arthas sort of lost at the Church of the Holy Light that you were able to free yourself from the influence of Arthas. Before that, you were entirely tied to Arthas, insofar as during that storyline, you kill your own fucking sister. Because the Lich King tells you to. Pretty dark fucking story back in the day. If you think about it, it was a pretty dark story back in the day for the Lich King. For DKs. The first mortal person to wield the powers of death, light, and void. Death magic, not so much. Arthur's Anduin is close to death magic now. He should no longer have any essence of that in him. Void could actually suggest that they were... Like, the light was completely wrong about who the actual child of light and shadow is. Because right now, Anduin also fits that bill. We know that Anduin is a priest. He uses the light, but he also has void within him, which makes him a true child of light and shadow. And according to the light, or according to the prophecies, it is the child of light and shadow that will save us all. That Zalfang and Varian Soul actually went into Charlemagne? It is possible. Although Charlemagne already has a soul inside of it, so it's not necessary, but it is possible. Anduin will save Sylvanas in the future? Depends how you view saving. Isn't Arathor a child of light and shadow? Right now, we have three options, Apo, for child of light and shadow. The first is what the light believes, Illidan. Arathor is... So the reason I never bought into Arathor being the child of light and shadow is Arathor was born before Turalyon joined the Army of the Light and long before Illyria joined the Army of the Void, or started using void magic. Arathor effectively was born from a paladin making fucky with a high elf. Arathor is simply a half elf. Like, there's nothing special about Arathor. It's now that, you know, once his mother comes back, she had chosen the Void, and obviously Turalyon has chosen the Army of the Light. So technically now he is the child of one that chose the Void and one that chose the Light, which technically could make him the child of Light and Shadow. But those had no implications at his birth. They were not present at his birth, so they technically would not matter at his birth. That's the one reason why I've always sort of questioned the Arathor speculation theory, that he could be the child of light and shadow. I'm not saying it's impossible, I just question it. I'm leaning far more towards Anduin or Illidan. They're the ones that make the most sense. Illidan quite literally is that. If we agree that Fel was created where the light and the void clashed fiercest, then Fel is the amalgamation of both light and void. Then that means that any being that is completely ingratiated with Fel becomes Fel, light and void. right? Therefore, the child of light and shadow, Illidan. And then Anduin, because he's a priest, but he also has void essence within him. So I would say right now, Anduin, Illidan, any one of those two could be it. Arathor could be a good addition if Blizzard wanted to swing the story that way, because it introduces yet another character to the story that could potentially be an interesting addition to the story. But I don't, right now I don't see how that is possible, unless there's some fuckery with fate. So the timeline suggests that even at the birth of Arathor, because Illyria would always choose Shadow, even at his birth, he became, you know, so you understand what I mean, right? Some time fuckery could explain that away, I guess. Dustin, describe different. When you say Shadow is different to Void, right? Describe different. Because, so, let me just bring this up. Open a new tab. Okay, here we go. So, you have Light, Holy, and the Naru. And then at the bottom here, you have Shadow, Shadow Void, Void Lords, Old Gods. Now, you could make the argument that these are different, and yet, then these would be different too. Then Light and Holy and the Naru would also be different things. The Naru ingratiate themselves quite literally to the light. They believe that they are beings of the light, right? So it doesn't matter. The same goes for the Void. The fact that Shadow is on the outside here, then you have Shadow in brackets Void, suggests to me they are exactly the same thing. Did the cleansing of Rathian's egg involve the light? Because if so, no. Rathian's egg was cleansed by Alexstrasza and the Red Dragons. So it involved Red Dragon life magic, effectively. Describe evil. You have 4 hours. You see, I don't buy into the idea of evil in World of Warcraft. I hate the idea of evil in World of Warcraft, because I don't think evil actually exists in World of Warcraft. Let me rephrase that. I don't think evil should exist in World of Warcraft. I think if you make something evil, you immediately take it off the table. Right? You can instantly not really fuck around with it anymore because it is quote unquote evil. I think it's far better if you have these forces simply being different with their own motives and their own goals, which can sometimes align, which can sometimes run directly counter to us. And I think it opens more freedom in how you want to tell the story. Evil is difficult because once something is evil, there's no way of reversing that, right? It's evil. You can't reverse that anymore. It's one of the reasons why so many people have a very hard time with Blizzard now sort of selling this story that Order is an enemy and that the Void may actually not be the evil that they always believed it to be. Because for people, the Void was always considered to be the enemy. End of discussion. Because the Void was evil. Now Blizzard is trying to write this story where the Void is simply different, not necessarily evil. And for a lot of people, it's like, whoa, no. I don't buy that. The Void is evil. Of course they're evil. We always knew that they were evil. And I don't care what you say. And before you guys go, that's not true. I promise you, go check out my comment section on videos where I talk about this. There are people that refuse to believe even for an instant. There are people that say that the books that we found at the beginning of Dragonflight, where the Titan Keepers clearly lied to us, where Tyr not tier, where Odin says in so many fucking words, we are too stupid, right? Too stupid to understand the truth, and therefore it should be hidden from us. There's certain things that we should just never know. There are people that go, those books were planted. That's not really how Order thinks. It was all made up. It's lies. We don't know who wrote those books. So, yeah, evil paints you into a corner. Once you have something as evil, very few people will accept anything other than. Antonio, how you doing, bro? I am South African, yes. Yeah, it's a psyop. Yeah, Blizzard's writing it more that evil isn't an inherent, a cosmic power, so much as the intentions of those whom use those powers are evil. I don't even like that argument. What the argument that the way that I would write World of Warcraft if it was up to me would be, each of these forces have a goal, right? They want to get somewhere. Let's bring up my favorite new fucking thing here, right? Let's bring up paint. So this is the goal, right? This is where they want to get to. This is the goal. This is the number one place. If only I could get here, life would be so fucking good, right? This is the goal. This is the light, right? We have a little demon over here. He's just chilling, right? He's just chilling with these little horns. Demon there. You have a titan. He's ordered, so he has lines. Right, this is a titan. All right, you have the titan. You have an old god, which is a fucking amalgamation blob with many eyes. All right, so there you go. Some tentacles for those of you that like tentacle porn. Why not? You have life, which is fucking. Let's just draw a very silly leaf, right? Nice penis. That's life. Life comes from the penis. Why not? All right. And the final force we need. We have Titan. Which one are we missing? Death. Let's just do a crown. Fuck it. There we go. Crown of Wolves. All right. So all of these want to get here, right? This is where they want to get to. They want to get to this goal. This is their goal. Now, this could be different goals. They don't all have to have the exact same goal. They might have very different goals, but ultimately, this is where they want to go, right? They want to get to the goal. Now, if our goal, so let's say we are here, right? This is us. We're the player. We have our little sword. Life's good, you know, look at us. We're smiling. We're so happy. Look at me. I just got some new loot. A nice loot bag over there. All right. I'm happy, right? This is my goal too. I want to go here. Who knew? Well, guess what? The light wants to go here as well. So me and the light, partners. But let's say my goal was here. The light views this goal as an absolute fucking no-no. So for the light, this is just a terrible, terrible outcome. Well, now suddenly I am standing in the way of the light's goal. Because what I want to do is I want to go here. I do not want this one, because this one's bad. Bad, bad, bad. Don't want this one. I want this one because this one's good. The light, on the other hand, doesn't want this one. They want this one because this one's good. So now I've become the light's enemy. And me and the light, we're going to have one hell of a fucking battle over here because the light now sees me as the enemy. So as long as me and the light, or me and any of these cosmological forces, as long as we are aligned in their specific goals, we can be friends. If our goals were ever to run counter to theirs, we immediately become the quote-unquote enemy of those cosmic forces. Does that make sense? At least does the way that I see it make sense? Run into way too many walls, Echo? Yeah, well, they are what they are. Raphael, that's what I said with freedom. Since we don't know what those goals are, and World of Warcraft has never actually outlined any of those goals outside of survival for us as mortals, it allows Blizzard to literally make those goals whatever the fuck they want. So Blizzard can have as many goals as they literally want all over the place, and we would not even know, nor would we question it. Now, if you change that story, so let's go back to the old way of doing things, so how Blizzard used to do things. The way things used to work in World of Warcraft was that we were friends with the light, we were friends with the Titans, and we were friends with life. All right? We were friends. We were all very happy together. We were making love and singing songs and dancing around. It was beautiful. These other three forces, they were not friends, but kind of friends insofar as they were against us, right? They were against us, and so this was sort of the story. Well, now it's a lot harder, because now you need very clearly defined reasons, first and foremost, for why we want certain things, and those reasons have to align with each of these guys, right? So you can no longer just tell your own story. All of these guys have to agree. These three have to agree, and it has to make sense in order why we want to get to this goal. You can't just do whatever the fuck you want anymore. But you also need to keep in mind that maybe the goal that you just wrote kind of makes sense that the demons would want this goal as well. Well, then why the fuck are the demons fighting us? Since we seem to want the same thing because of what you wrote. You instantly come up with an incredibly convoluted story that is just infinitely going to become more and more convoluted as you add more and more circles of influence and more beings that might want certain circles, but we might want those same circles at some point. So it just becomes convoluted. Whereas if these 6 forces are completely unique forces, each with their own individual likes, dislikes, wants, needs, and all the rest of it, it opens it makes it much more free. Right? It's now a free-form story that you can pretty much do anything with. No questions asked. Everyone is basically fighting their own war for their own reasons, and those reasons do not necessarily need to be defined. Remember, as soon as you define something, it's nice for a story. So if you have a story like this, let me do another paint here, down save. Let's say you have a story where this is the start, the middle bit, and the end, right? And the natural flow of your story is start, middle, end. That's the natural flow. And the end here truly is the end. It truly is the end. There's no extra story that's coming out. There's no second book, or there's no continuation of the story. It's the end. This is where it ends. Then it's fine to reach full conclusion at the end here, right? You want to reach full conclusion at the end here. Kuba, how you doing, bro? Thanks for the sub. Really appreciate that. Welcome to the channel. Thank you. In fact, if you don't reach full conclusion at the end there, the reader or the person that's enjoying your story is going to be fucking livid, because I just read however many books. So let's imagine that you wrote 5 books, right? Or let's say you wrote 3 books. This is the 3 books. One is very thick. It's The Lord of the Rings. You wrote 3 books, right? And all of these 3 books tell this story, right? This entire story, the beginning, the middle, and the end, is all told by this story, right? This year is this story. If you get to this point here and you have not reached a full conclusion with all things tied neatly into a bow, the community is going to be fucking livid with you. So you have to. But what happens if your story does not have an end? So what happens if your story does not just have 3 books? It has an endless amount of books. So it has books, right? To infinitum. It has an infinite number of books, right? And this story never ends. What happens then? Well, now suddenly conclusions close avenues. Because the story no longer looks like this. The story can look like this, right? I could go here with my story, and then once I'm done here, I could go here, right? But then maybe I can go here with my story, and then maybe I can circle back from this story to this point, and then go over here with my story. So I can literally take my story where the fuck I want. There's no reason for me to worry about the story because the story is open-ended. There's an infinite number of stories that I can tell. Now, as soon as I reach a conclusion, so let's say here, I conclude my story, or at least parts of the story, it instantly means that a number of possible stories have just died. You could probably have this many possible stories, but they have all died because you concluded. So now you have one of 2 options. You either retcon the living fuck out of this, and this is what Blizzard have done in the past, right? Just retcon this thing. Retcon the hell out of it, right? Retcon it, get rid of it. As if it never existed. Let's get back to this one. Let's go. Now we can tell new stories. Not the best of ideas, because again, you leave the player base with this. The player base feels cheated because they bought into this story as being a full conclusion. Now you've just retconned the fuck out of it. The player base doesn't like that. It's far better to just never have a full conclusion on a story. Have moments where people agree this is the conclusion, but never confirm. Blue door. So there's a no. So you could have, let me give you an example of how you could do this without it becoming just a mess of no answers ever given. All right? Because I can see that's what a lot of people might think. So let's say I have a story where I'll take a story from World of Warcraft. Broxigar. Broxigar jumps into a portal at the final moments, and the last thing we see of Broxigar is him fighting Sargeras, right? That's the last thing we see of Broxigar. He's fighting Sargeras, right? And Broxigar is going apeshit. That's the last we ever see of Broxigar. We don't know what actually happened because the portal here is closed. This portal is closed. It's dead. It's no longer working. It closed before we could see the inevitable end of what happened to Broxigar. So right now, Broxigar effectively exists in limbo. It's Schrodinger's Broxigar. Broxigar is either alive or dead. No one knows. The community makes up their own story. My story did reach a satisfying conclusion. And all those who were present at the moment of the portal's closing saw Broxigar jump in, and they had their own stories to tell. So, coming back from this war, they tell us Broxigar died saving our lives, keeping Sargeras from coming through the portal. We saw him jump in. He's dead. Is Broxigar actually dead? No. From their perspective, Broxigar is dead. But Broxigar isn't dead because we don't know. We have not seen it. We have simply inferred it based on what we saw leading up to it, right? I'm not told. I know the old quest line shows Broxigar dead. That's where I'm going, Raphael. Cool your jet, right? So the only time we learn, finally get a conclusion, is in the Orc Heritage questline. Now, personally, this is what I mean with conclusions. Now that we know Broxigar has expired, it means that Broxigar can never again be used in World of Warcraft, except if you invent some kind of story. So you have to invent a resurrection, or you have to invent some kind of force pulling him out of the Shadowlands, whatever the case may be, right? But you have to invent a way to bring Broxigar back because you have concluded that Broxigar is indeed dead. That's the problem with conclusions in stories. If you make the conclusion perspective-based, so based on what I saw, and only based on what I saw, this is what happened, I can freely change as much as I want. Because it was only based on my perception of things. It was only based from my perspective. I did not know what happened on the other side. Therefore, I cannot know what the full truth would be. So it just allows you so much more freedom to actually tell your story. And a world that does this pretty much all the time, non-stop, is Warhammer 40k. In Warhammer 40k, I've been reading it like a motherfucker. It's one of the greatest universes that has ever been invented, in my opinion. Every single one of their books is told 100% from the perspective of a character within the universe. They have none of their books are ever written from a narrative perspective. There's never a narrator that is sort of omnipresent and sees all things happening. All events in Warhammer 40k books are from the perspective of whichever character is dealt with in that moment. So right now I'm reading the book Pariah. Pariah deals with young sort of champions of the Emperor. And this champion of the Emperor, she's on the run. She's running away from dark forces trying to kill them. The whole book deals with her journal. So the book is literally a journal that she wrote, and she's telling you the story of what had happened to her, but it is 100% from her perspective. She doesn't know what the other characters are doing. The only thing she knows is when those characters' actions interfere with her story. This is basically Warhammer 40k. I think Steve Denuser is moving World of Warcraft to that type of that type of storytelling, that type of narrative, where the narrative is far more subjective insofar as it just allows for freedom. They can do pretty much whatever the fuck they want. That, or you have to be okay with retcons, right? If you aren't okay with retcons, you're not... You have to want my way of storytelling. If you don't want retcons, my way of storytelling is the best. If you don't mind retcons, then you can reach conclusions, but then you have to understand in an MMO that effectively will never end unless it really ends, they're gonna be forced to retcon at some point, right? And direct. Yeah, it's Sunday Night Chill Show. Does that make sense to everyone, the way that I just described it? That's how I see it. You might have a different opinion, of course. You're welcome to your opinion. But that's how I see it. I'm really enjoying Steve's work on Dragonflight. I'm very fascinated to see how the expansion concludes. Like I said before, Steve Denuser and the team is definitely taking a very dangerous approach that can either pay off gloriously or it can be a giant fuck up. In the past, Blizzard have sort of always worked for immediate payoffs. That was the old World of Warcraft was about immediate payoffs every single patch. So patch 1 would have a giant payoff at the end, you know, either a big character dying, some big character being introduced, an oh shit moment for every patch. And it was fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. We all loved old school WoW. There's nothing wrong with that. But the new Blizzard seems to be going for the big oh shit moment at the end. So there's a lot more foreplay in the new Blizzard. They're really blue balling and tickling the balls. You know, they're spending their time edging the player base to fuck. And now the only thing we're going to have to hope for is that it actually pays off. So that we actually do get that ultimate release. Because if we don't... Ooh, player base are going to be angry as fuck. I mean, there's going to be super outrage if the payoff isn't there. Because then you've just wasted people's time so much more. Traxy, by the way, how you doing? Happy birthday, ladies and gentlemen. Can I get some hearts in chat for Traxy? It is their birthday today. Thank you so much for joining on your birthday. Very happy to have you here. And yeah, for anyone that's asking, this is the new time of the Shill Show. It's never changing again. Every Sunday, we will meet this time for the Shill Show. I did 2 polls, and in both polls, Sunday night won. You guys spoke. You want the Sunday night Shill Show. You prefer Sundays. I don't know why, but you do seem to prefer it, so this is when we do it. But anyways, yeah, Traxy, very happy birthday to you. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, with that said, I am going to go because I still need to run the Shill Show through an actual edit so that I can upload it to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all the rest of it. So I appreciate all of you for coming out. Also, Zix for the $5. Really appreciate you. Because nobody raids on Sundays. I mean, a lot of people raid on Sunday, no? I mean, this started as a Sunday Night Chill Show. This is where it started. It started as a Sunday Night Chill Show. And it was really good for a long time. You know, we ended up having 400 plus viewers at some point. With the Sunday Night Chill Show. So I'm hoping we get back to that. It would be really cool if we could get back to like 300-400 viewers chilling out on a Sunday. Because Sundays is really cool. It's like it's the ultimate time to sort of sit and have lore discussions and stuff. So I really hope that you guys enjoy the conversations here. If you did enjoy it, please hit the like button. It does help out. I don't think you guys realize how much likes help. The more you like, the more YouTube suggests, right, and tells other people to watch. So it really does help if you smack that like button. I really appreciate all of you for hanging out, for spending your afternoon, whichever time of the day it is for you, with me. It's an absolute pleasure, an absolute honor. I'm gonna go edit this. Then the Patreon podcast for all of the patrons and of course the YouTube members, that's gonna be tomorrow night. So tomorrow night around, let's make it 7 o'clock. We'll do the Patreon podcast. So for those of you that is a patron or a YouTube member, it should be up tomorrow at, let's make it 9 o'clock at the latest, right? Should be when it's uploaded for you and ready for you. South African time, standard time. So yeah, you guys have that to look forward to. Your hentai was already delivered 3 days ago on the 1st. The stickers for everyone that gives $5 a month or more, your stickers should be coming to you in the next few weeks or so. So yeah, and I believe this month's sticker is actually lewd, not super hentai, naughty as fuck, naked. I think it's just a lewd sticker, but I could be wrong. I could be mistaken. As an American, it's just much easier for me to tune in on a Sunday. Dustin, I think that's why so many people asked for the Sunday night Shill show rather than, like, you know, Monday night, because for a lot of Americans, when we do the Shill show, it's still very early, and so it's just they'd rather, you know, they're working or they're in meetings or whatever. So Sundays is just a better day in general. I don't mind, you know, whichever time. I do the Shill shows, quite frankly, now just to hang out and sort of talk more broadly. So in the past, the way the Shill shows worked is I would actually do videos. I would actually grab footage from the Shill shows and turn them into actual videos. I no longer do that. So the videos that you guys are going to get next week are all scripted, highly edited, fucking made from scratch. The Shill show is the Shill show because we discuss broader topics. So when I take a topic that I don't have enough information on yet to make a video, or it's a topic like the one we just had, where I want to talk about a concept that is very difficult to sort of describe and I want to figure it out. That's the Shill shows. So it's more just a way for us to hang out and sort of chat shit, if you will. So yeah, I'm hoping people enjoy it. It's a bit of news coverage and all the rest of it. So right now it's 10 p.m. Year, Patlin. 10 p.m. for me right now. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this week. I've got some really fun videos lined up already. We'll see what news comes out. We're probably going to be streaming Diablo 3 on Tuesday. Diablo 4, not 3. What the fuck? We'll be streaming Diablo 4 on Tuesday over on Twitch for those of you that want to come watch. As we go through the story, it's going to be super chill, same as this, just playing the story. That will be on Twitch. The links are also in the description down below. Anyways, I've wasted enough of your fucking time, ladies and gentlemen. I love all of you. Thank you so much for hanging out. To everyone that supports, everyone that becomes YouTube members, everyone that gave super chats. I love all of you so much. Without you, this channel would no longer exist. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, be kind to each other. Be good to each other. And I will see all of you in the next one. Peace out, fam.